Fear is a primal force. It is written into our biology, hardwired into our survival instinct. But spiritual fear, fear of rejection, fear of death, fear of loss, fear of meaninglessness, these are not mere evolutionary mechanisms. They are distortions that occur when the soul forgets who holds it. 27 doesn't begin by pretending that fear does not exist. It begins by confronting it directly. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The rhetorical question is not naive. It is revelatory. It reveals that fear loses legitimacy when the divine reality is properly acknowledged. The fear that grips most people is not fear of monsters or storms. It is the quiet, persistent dread that we are alone, that life is random, and that suffering has no purpose. We fear because we feel exposed. Psalm 27 refutes this. It begins with a theological claim so robust that it deconstructs fear at the root. God is light and salvation. Light dispels darkness. Salvation secures destiny. These are not poetic metaphors only, they are ontological truths. God is not merely a protector, He is the very condition by which fear loses coherence. This kind of fearless living does not emerge through human willpower. You cannot reason your way out of fear by repeating slogans or motivational mantras. That's the difference between secular positivity and biblical boldness. Psalm 27 offers not distraction but reorientation. It teaches us to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord, not to pretend threats don't exist. The fear that grips your chest, that paralyzes decision, that whispers you are not enough, that fear begins to loosen when your focus is no longer on yourself but on the one who is eternal. The psalmist acknowledges enemies. He does not deny them. He acknowledges the presence of armies, evildoers, war, but the fear is neutralized not because these threats vanish, but because the Lord is with him. This is not just comforting sentiment. This is theological recalibration. If God is light, then darkness, no matter how thick, cannot be final. If God is salvation, then danger, no matter how imminent, cannot be ultimate. Fear shrinks in the light of eternal perspective. There is a spiritual rhythm here. The more time we spend gazing at God's beauty, the less our gaze lingers on fear. Fear feeds on attention. It expands when it becomes the central narrative in our minds. But worship, contemplation, and prayer, these rewire the soul to fix its eyes elsewhere. Psalm 27 calls us not merely to analyze our fears, but to displace them. And what displaces fear is awe. When God becomes larger in your inner vision, fear loses the space to dominate. Even psychology nods to this truth. Exposure to a safe presence reduces anxiety. How much more then does constant exposure to the presence of God through word, prayer, and communion reshape the psyche? Psalm 27 is a prescription, not to avoid fearful situations, but to reframe them through the unshakable reality of God's nearness. For in the day of trouble, He will keep me safe in His dwelling. There is no safer place than His presence. Not because harm can't come, but because harm can never define you when you abide in Him. Fear thrives in the unknown, but when God becomes known intimately, personally, relationally, fear begins to die. Not all at once, but gradually. Like ice melting under steady sunlight, the grip of fear dissolves under the warmth of divine intimacy. Psalm 27 does not make you fearless by making you tough. It makes you fearless by making you rooted. Not in ego, not in illusion, but in the unchanging God who is light, salvation, and stronghold. And so, when you start your day with Psalm 27, not just reciting, but absorbing, it becomes armor for your soul. You begin to walk differently. You respond to stress differently. You look at uncertainty not with panic, but with patience. Fear may still knock at the door, but it no longer takes up residence. Why? Because because salvation is near, because the Lord is not an abstract concept, but a present living force, and where He is, fear has no claim. Desire is at the core of every human life. It is not a peripheral energy, it is the engine that drives everything we do. Behind our pursuits, our careers, relationships, accomplishments, is always a deeper longing. To be fulfilled, to be complete, to be at home. Psalm 27 speaks to this ancient and universal ache, not by denying it, but by directing it. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. In a single breathtaking sentence, the psalmist reorients the entire map of human desire. He is no longer chasing many things. He is seeking one, and that one thing is God. This is not an easy shift. We live in a culture that celebrates desire but multiplies it in 1,000 directions. We are told to follow our hearts, chase our dreams, accumulate experiences, but the result is often exhaustion, not joy. We chase fulfillment across landscapes that cannot sustain it, only to find that the more we grasp, the more empty we feel. Psalm 27 intervenes like a compass, not condemning desire but purifying it. The psalmist is not empty of longing. He is ablaze with it. But his desire has been honed to a singular point, intimacy with the divine. This is the paradox of spiritual maturity. You do not desire less. You desire more, but you finally learn to aim it rightly. The soul, which once wandered through lesser loves, comes to recognize that all beauty, all peace, all meaning are shadows of a greater reality. And so it no longer settles for reflections. It seeks the source, that I may gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and seek him in his temple. Notice the language. It is visual, relational, reverent. This is not obligation. This is adoration. The psalmist is not driven by fear, but by fascination. Here we encounter a central truth of the spiritual life. True worship is not mere ritual. It is love, and love, by nature, desires nearness. The one who loves God does not merely admire him from a distance. They long to dwell with him. To gaze upon his beauty is to enter into communion, not just observation. It is to be transformed by what one sees. This is why the saints always speak of the presence of God as the soul's home. It is not escapism. It is return. It is a coming back to the one from whom all things flow. The desire for God's presence also begins to affect the structure of your life. You no longer compartmentalize spirituality into occasional moments. Instead, every space becomes potential temple, every hour a sanctuary. Prayer becomes not an activity but an atmosphere. You begin to seek him not just in church buildings but in your room, your car, your walk, your work. And over time, his presence shifts from being an idea to being a reality that pervades your waking moments. The line between sacred and secular begins to blur, not because God becomes common, but because everything becomes sacred in his presence. This spiritual hunger creates a subtle but powerful transformation. You stop being entertained by what used to thrill you. Worldly accomplishments lose their shine. Empty conversations bore you. You begin to crave depth, beauty, and truth. You hunger for scripture, for silence, for worship that lifts the soul rather than tickles the senses. It's not that you become disengaged from the world, but that your engagement is now fueled by something higher. You serve not out of duty but delight. And yet this shift in desire is not always comfortable. When you begin to desire God's presence above all, it creates a holy discontent with anything less. You feel the ache of absence more sharply. You become more sensitive to sin, not just because it is wrong, but because it distances you from intimacy. The soul begins to grieve not because God is withdrawn, but because it has allowed distraction to dull its vision. Repentance becomes less about guilt and more about longing, a cry to return to the gaze of divine beauty. Your face, Lord, I will seek. This is not theology, it is the language of lovers. Ultimately, when your desire shifts toward God's presence, your identity shifts as well. You no longer define yourself by achievements or failures, by roles or relationships. You become a dweller, a seeker, a lover of God. You wake not simply to go to work or fulfill obligations, but to return again and again to the source. Psalm 27 is not a distant echo of someone else's spiritual journey. It becomes your own anthem. It teaches you to live with singular passion, to see with eternal eyes, and to hunger, not for a better life, but for the presence of the giver of life himself. And in that hunger, paradoxically, you are most satisfied. Chaos is not an occasional disturbance. It is the constant backdrop of modern life. We live in a world where foundations tremble, economies fluctuate, relationships unravel, cultures shift, and the soul, if untethered, drifts with the tides. But Psalm 27 introduces a remarkable possibility: stability, not the superficial calm of untroubled circumstances, but the profound rootedness of a life anchored in God. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. The war arise against me, yet I will be confident. This is not denial of chaos. It is a declaration of dominion within it. The psalmist is not speaking from a safe mountaintop. He is surrounded, but he is not shaken. What gives him this composure? It is not inner strength in the modern psychological sense. It is not resilience built by self-help routines or optimistic thinking. It is theological. His equilibrium is sourced in something beyond himself. The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? A stronghold is not a metaphor here. It is a spiritual reality. To the one who abides in God, chaos becomes background noise. It may swirl and scream, but it cannot dictate, because the heart has found a fortress, and that fortress is not a place, but a person. This sense of divine stability does not eliminate the chaos. That is crucial to understand. Psalm 27 does not promise a life free from enemies, disappointments, or anxieties. It promises a different kind of life, a life where the soul is not yoked to the instability of circumstances. It offers what the world cannot, a still center in the whirlwind. The spiritual life, rightly understood, is not about escape from difficulty, but about transformation within it. The world will rage, but the heart that is fixed on God stands as a sanctuary amid the storm. The psalmist's confidence is forged in communion. His strength is not stoic detachment, but relational intimacy. He will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will lift me high upon a rock. Each verb is an action of God. Stability is an action of God. Stability is not self-made, it is received. It is the result of divine protection, divine concealment, divine elevation. This is not poetic flourish, it is a liturgy of trust. In the chaos of life, the believer does not need to fabricate peace. He needs to enter into the peace already offered by God. And what does this divine shelter look like in practical terms? It is the peace that descends in prayer when the heart feels like breaking. It is the sudden sense of stillness and worship when your world is falling apart. It is the wisdom that arises in silence, the clarity that cuts through confusion when you return to the Word. The believer who abides in God is not numb to reality, but is stabilized by a deeper one. He does not avoid trouble, but walks through it upright, guided by an invisible hand, sustained by an unshakable presence. There is a subtle but powerful truth embedded in Psalm 27's progression. Confidence grows in the chaos, not in the absence of it. Then my head shall be lifted up above my enemies all around me. Notice, he is not out of danger, yet he is elevated. His posture changes before the battle ends. That is the mark of spiritual maturity, not waiting for the circumstances to calm down to find peace, but standing tall in the middle of the storm because your roots are sunk deep in divine soil. The soul that is trained to seek God in the wilderness discovers he is not just at the destination. He is the rock in the desert. This inner stability also becomes a witness. In a world addicted to anxiety and enslaved by fear, the one who is grounded in God shines without effort. Peace becomes evangelistic. Joy becomes disruptive. Stability becomes contagious. Others begin to wonder how you endured the storm without losing your song. And the answer is not strength, but surrender to the one who sits enthroned above the flood. The stable soul points not to itself, but to the source. So when Psalm 27 speaks of confidence in chaos, it is not offering an escape plan. It is offering a person. It does not say a life will not collapse, but it proclaims, you will not collapse if your life is built on him. This is the divine paradox. The more chaotic the world becomes, the more radiant and grounded the children of God can be. Because they do not stand on shifting sand, they stand on a rock that does not move. And when you begin your day with this psalm not as mere poetry, but as proclamation, you declare to every fear, every foe, every storm, I am not moved, for I am held. Modern life is built on striving. From the moment we wake up, we are urged to push harder, do more, rise higher. Success is painted as a race against time, relevance, and failure. Striving becomes a default mode, a tireless effort to earn value, secure identity, and avoid insignificance. Yet within this constant churn, the soul becomes weary. Psalm 27 offers a sacred interruption to this cycle of striving, not by asking us to do more, but by inviting us to do something far deeper, to seek. Your face, Lord, I will seek. This shift from striving to seeking is not just a change in behavior, but a revolution of the heart. To strive is to act as though everything depends on your effort, to live as if the weight of the world sits on your shoulders. It is to assume the posture of one who must earn love, manufacture purpose, and outrun failure. But to seek is to turn one's gaze from self to God. It is not a withdrawal from effort, but a redirection of focus. In seeking, we still move, But our movement is not anxious. It is not driven by fear of falling behind. It is drawn by the beauty of the one we pursue. Seeking is not passive. It is full of energy, but it is energy rooted in love, not fear. This distinction is crucial. Striving is fueled by scarcity, while seeking is rooted in abundance. When you strive, you operate from the belief that something vital is missing and must be attained through your performance. But when you seek, you acknowledge that what you need already exists. It is God's presence and it is already near. Your role is not to create it, but to become aware of it, to hunger for it, and to walk toward it. Seeking requires humility, not hustle. It acknowledges that the deepest things cannot be achieved, they must be received. When the psalmist says, "With face, Lord, I will seek," he is not speaking of a task to check off, but of a posture to dwell in. To seek God's face is to desire His nearness above His gifts. It is to hunger not just for what He can do, but for who He is. This is the essence of true spirituality, not performance but pursuit. And unlike striving, which leads to exhaustion, seeking leads to rest. Not because you stop moving, but because your movement is finally aligned with your soul's true direction. This shift also transforms how we define progress. In the world's economy, success is measured by visible outcomes, wealth, influence, productivity. But in the kingdom of God, success is measured by depth of relationship. When you are seeking the face of God, you begin to notice spiritual progress not by how much you accomplish, but by how much you surrender. Not by how many doors you force open, but by how clearly you can hear His whisper. You begin to find fulfillment in quiet obedience, joy in delayed answers, and purpose in simply being with Him. Seeking teaches you that fruit grows not through frantic effort, but through abiding. Moreover, seeking recalibrates your priorities. The things you once chased begin to lose their pull. You no longer strive to impress, to outperform, or to be seen. Your days are no longer dictated by the noise of the world, but by the voice of the shepherd. You begin to wake not asking, "What must I do to be enough?" "Oh Lord, where are you in this moment?" Your ambition becomes holy. Your time becomes sacred. Your decisions begin to flow from discernment, not desperation. This is the life of one who seeks. It is quieter, deeper, freer. There is also a deep peace that comes when striving gives way to seeking. Striving always carries the anxiety of control. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if I'm overlooked? But seeking releases that burden. You realize that your life is not your project, but God's masterpiece. You stop rushing and begin resting in His timing. You let go of comparison. You embrace the beauty of the slow path because you trust that the one you seek is faithful. Each day you choose to seek, you resist the culture of striving. You become a pilgrim, not a performer. You find joy in His presence, not in applause. And as you continue to seek His face, something remarkable happens. Your soul begins to breathe again. The restlessness quiets. The burdens lift. And you discover that what you were striving for all along, peace, worth, direction, was always waiting for you, not at the finish line of your effort, but in the presence of the one who was seeking you first. Waiting is one of the most spiritually demanding tasks in the human experience. It tests not only our patience, but our trust. We live in a world that hates delay, that idolizes speed, that equates immediacy with effectiveness. But Psalm 27 ends with a countercultural command, gentle yet firm. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord. This is not passive resignation or bored inactivity. It is a summons to a deeper form of strength, strength rooted not in motion, but in stillness, not in results, but in trust. Waiting, in the biblical sense, is not weakness. It is courage refined through surrender,